So we were at the Digiday Programmatic Summit, and it was actually a really good Digiday event. I mean, Digiday always does a good job, but I think this one was particularly well done. Something that was different for this Digiday event from past ones that we've been to is that there was a really equal mix of publishers, agencies, and tech vendors, where usually the events are heavy on one of the three. This one was just really well mixed. And of course, the topic of the day was programmatic, and everyone there was talking about the extent to which they thought programmatic was working and the problems that they thought it still had. At the very beginning, they laid out what they wanted to talk about for the event, so I think that's probably worth going over. There were 5 issues. One was organizational challenges, so that really was about on the agency side. It was about how you get people within the agency who have been media planning and buying in a very quote-unquote manual process to start using automated tools, and what the education process for them using the tools looks like, and how you get them educated on which tools you get them educated, et cetera, which was really an organizational challenge for the agencies. The second was transparency. So the programmatic world, we heard a lot about this over the weekend, the programmatic world is a world that is more data-centric and less content-centric. But the problem with that is it's sort of gone to an extreme where you'd have no idea where your advertising is running, and people are starting to feel uncomfortable because they're running on places where they don't necessarily want to, even though they're sort of following the data down that path. That kind of leads to point 3, which was fraud. I actually had no idea, but the amount of fraud that people are seeing in the programmatic system is significant. About 25% of all ad impressions are being called fraudulent in some of these SSPs and exchanges. So you're talking about a quarter of all the ads that you're running. So that's a major problem that the programmatic players need to address in order to give programmatic the legitimacy that's going to attract ad dollars to it. And with that, the fourth problem was viewability. So there were statistics that they put up on the board that said literally 50% of ads that run on the internet, that includes desktop and mobile and tablet, are not viewable. And they didn't break out the percentages by each, but just across the board, about 50% of the ads that are essentially run in digital advertising are not being seen. So obviously this is a huge problem. And then the last thing was getting beyond display. How does programmatic do something besides standard banners? How do they tackle things like creativity, which some people have said have been completely left off the board for people to worry about later down the line? They think that those things should be tackled, and Cargo has actually talked a lot about how innovation in terms of ad creative should not be something that's punted on, but it should be something that's talked about up front. So those are the 5 big issues. And so we left with this feeling that, and people were saying this at the conference as well, that programmatic is just not as efficient as what everyone is saying it's going to be. Because when you layer in all of the challenges, it really isn't saving you as much money as you might think, or as much time as you might think. With 25% of what you're buying being fraudulent, that even if the price is low, you're actually paying more than you think you're paying. If 10% of the ads are running outside of the U.S. when they're supposed to be running inside the U.S., that's another 10% that you think you're not paying, but you're paying. And then the manual process of setting up some of these programmatic levers, like premium marketplaces, which is something they talked a lot about. You still have to do an individual deal ID where you have to get on the phone with tech vendors, sign different contracts, and it becomes very manual. So it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of costs associated with it. So long story short, the conference left, I think, everyone with the perception that there's still a lot of confusion, even though there's a lot of potential in the programmatic space. And then for Cargo, what I'll say is I think it paints us in a good light. We just made an announcement a couple days ago that we are pricing completely on viewability. So in the Cargo marketplace in the programmatic world, you can be guaranteed viewability. Also, we only work with about 50 of the top media companies in the world. So our publisher list is contained. And so there's not fraudulent traffic built in or long tail traffic built in that is non-transparent and potentially damaging to a brand. The Cargo marketplace is essentially very curated. So wherever you run inside of it, you're running on transparent quality traffic. And then the last piece is creative. So Cargo's done a lot to try to make sure that its marketplace is full of really fresh, innovative creatives that live beyond the banner. So we were happy as a takeaway that some of the stuff that we're working on in our marketplace is addressing some of the current needs in programmatic. I think To some extent, it's the infrastructure. So supply-side platforms and exchanges have not had a ton of rules around what qualifies you to sign up. So if you are a publisher, whether you're long tail, short tail, or in between, whether you're a real media company or a bot, you can go into a lot of these SSPs and just sign up to be a publisher. And in that system, you just appear as a statistic, right? And so the advertisers are buying across these SSPs and they don't know what the supply is, right? And to some extent, the SSPs, the suppliers themselves, don't know what is plugged in because there hasn't been enough barrier for entry. And so to get all of that waste out of the system, a lot of the big companies like an AppNexus, who we met at the conference, or Rubicon, have literally hired sort of quality assurance experts to kind of go back through the supply and weed out the problem areas. So it's something that is already built in and needs to kind of be taken out.
Is that where the curation on our part comes in really handy?
Well, I think Cargo's advantage there is that it's always been very curated, right? So it's an invite-only marketplace, and we are very strict about the qualifications for joining. These are ComScore 100 sites. These are very well-known publishers. These are publishers that spend lots of money on good editorial products. These are companies that invest in their own brands. These are companies that have pure traffic. These are companies that never have any bots associated with them. And so when we get incoming requests from companies that want to join that don't fit those qualifications, we simply don't let them join, and we don't have a, sign up yourself platform that would let anybody in. So I think we've taken a more careful approach to curating what the supply looks like. Well, events like this are very helpful, except it's a little bit preaching to the choir. So everyone there is already bought in to some extent, but there is a lot of confidence that this is happening and is going to happen. The statistic that we saw, and these change all the time, but the statistic that we saw is 63% of all digital advertising would be bought programmatically by the end of 2016. So you can find different statistics in different places, but that's what they were talking about at the conference. What's changing is like who's buying it, right? Now the media planners that work at the media buying agencies are starting to do more automated buying. In the past, it's mostly been the trading desks, which have been separated out from the traditional media planning desks. So as the traditional media planners start to do more automated buying, you're going to see a wave of adoption happen at a much faster rate. And I think that's what people were talking about at the conference. I was there with two other people from Cargo, and we spoke to a lot of people that were there. I think everyone was really surprised about the amount of fraud and the lack of viewability and the lack of transparency in the current programmatic system. Some of the agency buyers were downright upset about it. So I think quality matters in advertising. It's always mattered, but agencies, now that they have their hands on the tools, are seeing it more than ever. So the companies that are going to maintain higher standards and higher quality are the companies that I think will come out looking best in a new programmatic world. And I'm confident that Cargo is one of them. Data and creative are not mutually exclusive, right? But right now they're being treated that way, just as performance and brand advertising are treated sort of as mutually exclusive. I think what people in the conference were talking about, and what I agree with, is that they will converge. People will start to mix data with good creatives and serve a better creative to someone based on who they are. And brand advertising will have more data demands put on it. So you'll have to show some sort of ROI metric, even if it's top funnel brand advertising, whether that's an increase in awareness or something that is more appropriate for the top of the funnel. It may not be an actual purchase.